Who's the person joining?
We're good to start.
We're good to start, and we have a quorum. Do we?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. Jeffrey, I'm Martin DeCat. I am co-chair of the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee. We are recording this on Zoom and have permission to do open meetings on Zoom. I'm not going to go through all that. Most of you know it. Jeffrey Lefrancois is taking a well-deserved weekend. He will not be with us. And we have, as far as I know, unless people have new business that I haven't been informed of, 2 items on the agenda. The first piece is a presentation by Google. Who are the Google folks that are here? And the second is a presentation by Angela Pinsky. Did I say that correctly? Thank you. One of the advantages of Zoom, you know, is that everybody's name is listed. And when you're in the room with folks, if you're like me and very bad with names, every time I see Ken, I don't remember who he is. So I have to ask, who are you? No, he's one of the few people I don't do that with, but lots of folks you know the thing. Anyway, can we, without any further ado, if it's all right with you, I'm going to ask Google to make their presentation on Pier 57. Let me say one more thing, Angela, before you go. I got some photographs from Jeffrey, who went on the personal tour. And I hope you have some photographs for us, do you? We do. The photographs I saw of that pier are stunning. So that's a good introduction for you, Angela.
Thank you so much. And actually, it was a little bit of a misnomer that was on the agenda, although I wouldn't correct it since it put Google first. But this project is actually being presented by RXR, which is a partner of Young Woo's that actually owns the lease to the pier, and we are a tenant of theirs. So I'm going to turn it over to RXR.
And I'm just going to ask for or acknowledge that all of this is happening in Hudson River Park. So hi, Marty. Hi, CB4. Hudson River Park is in the house too.
And Noreen, thank you for jumping in and saying that.
Noreen, you're stealing my intro. Martin, it's good to meet you virtually. Hopefully we'll meet in person and the rest of the committee members who we didn't see on the tour. But I'm Jeff Nelson. I head of public-private partnerships at RXR. And as you know, we're joined by members of the Google team and Noreen to give you an overall update on our Pier 57 project. So you've already seen the pictures, I take it, but we're obviously thrilled to have a number of members of the committee on a tour and to meet everyone in person, particularly in the Zoom era. I think we will have great pictures here, but the best way to experience this project, if you have time, is to take a tour. And so if you weren't able to make that first tour, we'd be happy to offer another one to members of the committee. I think we can go to the next slide, Rob. And there you see a picture of everyone from the apron, which opened on Monday. So that's members of the committee and then those of us who are on the tour. Just by way of background, you know, Pier 57 is a historic building that's undergone really an extensive and painstaking renovation under the guidelines put forward by National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office. And the project will ultimately deliver extensive indoor and outdoor public space as well as offices for Google. Let's go to the next slide. So when we last spoke to the committee, which was some time ago, and I know there's some new members, we were in the midst of construction. And then the world kind of turned upside down with COVID. We were fortunate to be able to continue construction for the most part through that time and to show you where we are today. The guiding principles for this project have really been to create a mixed-use project that has significant public space. That includes both open space around the apron, on the roof and other areas, retail space, community education, entertainment spaces, and office space for Google as well. So the key components of the project and really the guiding principles were market at the front of the pier, a restaurant towards the west end of the pier, the ability for the public to really traverse the pier through the public spaces, viewing areas to allow you to see Little Island and the river and the park, and then access to and connectivity with a rooftop park, and we'll show you some pictures. On the next slide, just to orient you a little bit, this is the ground floor plan. So just to walk through how a member of the public would come in and experience this building, moving from kind of east to west. The first is activation is City Winery, and we'll show you some pictures of City Winery, which is now open and frequented by the public and has events as well. Directly adjacent to that will be the Market Hall, and that's a component that Google and Jamestown will be programming, and Angela will introduce Jamestown as part of the project in a little bit. You'll then have the ability to continue through an interior public walkway or around on the apron and reach community spaces and what we call the public living room with views south to Little Island. That's kind of delineated in yellow on the slide. That's the same area where there will be stairs and elevators leading up to the Sky Park. We'll show you pictures of that. And at the west end of the building is the restaurant space that I mentioned as well. Then in green, you see wrapping all around the apron, which is now open to the public as of Monday. So on the next slide, as I mentioned, we've been working through the pandemic on the space, and City Winery is now open. If you haven't had a chance to visit it, you should. It's event space, restaurant space. I actually haven't eaten there, but Noreen says the food is delicious, which is good to hear. But really, it's a tremendous way to initially activate this building, which we think will really become a fixture within the park for both Googlers as well as the general public. The other piece I wanted to show you, and then I'll turn it over to Google, is the Sky Park. So you may have seen some pictures shared by Jeffrey, but on the next slide, you'll see kind of what the finished product will look like. It's hard to do this justice in pictures to see the magnitude of the spaces up on the roof, but it's a multi-level space that gives you 360-degree views, including on the right, you can see this entirely new perspective on Little Island, which is really, I think, fabulous. This is also the space where Tribeca Film Festival will host events. They've been part of this project since inception, and they'll be up on the roof during their spring events. So all told, when you look at the public spaces, there's almost 3 acres of public space between the roof, the aprons, and other areas. So it's really an unbelievable, we think, addition to the overall park and the neighborhood. This will be open as interior construction concludes. We're projecting, in the spring. So we'll be looking forward to welcoming everyone up there. So those are the pieces I wanted to touch on. I think now I'll turn it over to Angela and Amy to talk a little bit about Google.
Hi, everyone. I am, although I think I know many of you, just to introduce myself, my name is Angela Pinsky. I cover government affairs and public policy for Google New York. I'm relatively new to Google in the sense that I joined right before COVID in January of 2020. So on some issues, I've spoken to parts of the community board, but on a lot of these things, this is sort of my first engagement. So thank you for having us. For those of you who knew Carly and worked with her, I've taken over Carly Graham Garcia's role. So anything that you used to reach out to her about or to William Floyd about, you can reach out to me. And I can put my contact information in the chat. But anything regarding Google, please feel free to reach out. Also, some of you may recognize my last name. My husband, Seth, used to work at RXR and also worked on this project. And so we joke a lot, and I made this joke on the tour, that the Pinskys couldn't stay away from Pier 57. And so when he left RXR, I joined Google, so we could always be close to this project because we love it so much. So we're excited to talk to you about Pier 57 as we're approaching our occupancy of the building. Before speaking to it, as Jeff mentioned, I just wanted to announce that Google has engaged Jamestown to manage the leasing and the ground floor space and public spaces that are part of Google's lease in Pier 57. It's going to be similar to the relationship that we have at Chelsea Market. where a lot of the public facing management will be with them. So you can also feel free to reach out to them and they will be presenting on the public spaces. But first I'll turn it over to Amy Kim, who's part of our real estate team, to talk about Google's occupancy in the building.
Thank you, Angela. So as Angela mentioned, I'm Amy Kim. I'm going to be the person responsible for the facilities operations of the space. We are so excited to occupy the Pier, and I joined Google back in March, and one of the reasons why I was really excited about joining the team was to be able to operate such a beautiful space as the Pier. It's really got a lot of amazing office space. Our marketing team is very, very excited to come in and to work out of this building. We've got about 500 seats that the marketing team is really excited about having the visibility with the community, about having the connection to the community and the activation of all the community spaces on the ground floor. And so we're going to be opening for occupancy in January of this year and couldn't be more excited.
Can we
So
advance the slide one? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Amy.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. So these are just some indicative photos of some of our spaces across our Google offices. Again, really, really excited to be joining the Pier, and we are expecting to occupy in January. So I think I will hand it over to Rob to go ahead and talk through more of the elements of the market hall and the rest of the spaces.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we move to the next slide, please? Great. So I'm Rob Marino. I'm a project manager at Jamestown working on Pier 57. As Angela previously stated, Jamestown's been engaged by Google to design, develop, lease, and operate the market hall and community spaces at the Pier. So, what is this market hall and what are we going to be delivering here? I think, first and foremost to us is that we're going to be delivering, a market hall, food hall that is going to serve as an incubator for local businesses, for small businesses, for culinary entrepreneurs. And really, we're going to be aiming to provide a platform that's both a sustainable environment for these emerging operators where they can launch new concepts and they can thrive and really be accessible on all ends. So we've actually already started the process of engaging operators for the lease up of the market hall. And, in looking at the mission of what we're trying to deliver here, we started in discussions with a culinary nonprofit to actually anchor the market hall to help us deliver on that vision for the space. So the program in the space will include up to 17 individual kiosks. We're going to be adding public restrooms to the space to support all the traffic to the market hall. And we'll also be designing all the kiosks with open canopies so that we can preserve those excellent views that come in from the Hudson and looking at the skyline and Little Island. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ali Shore and our team to run through a little bit about the community spaces.
Great, thank you, Rob. If we could jump ahead to the next slide. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Ali Shore. I am the VP of Creative and Marketing at Jamestown. I'm very excited to be sharing an update on the community space on the ground floor. So moving west from the market hall, there will be community space for dedicated use by local groups and organizations. There are classroom spaces that have been designed for flexibility that are suited for a range of community events and programming types. They are equipped with modular furniture and presentation and conferencing technology, and they can be easily arranged for a variety of gathering formats. So classroom learning and workshops and panel discussions, meetings, and more. And these are for exclusive use by the community and for our neighbors. Next slide. So these spaces run along what we're calling the public living room. So along the southern edge of the pier, the living room will serve as this sort of central gathering place on the ground floor. It is an amazing 2-story viewing corridor that will have ample seating and space for our neighbors. And this will be a very large space that will be free and open to the public year round. So this will sort of be a point of convergence that connects the market hall to the community spaces and also serve as the public entrance to the rooftop park. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Rob, and we can hop to the next slide.
Yeah, so back to me, I get to talk about actually what I think is one of the most exciting components of the pier. This is the Hudson River Park Classroom and Gallery. So this space is being developed in partnership between HRPT and Google. And the classroom component will allow HRPT to have educational programming year-round in the space. And the gallery is going to offer this opportunity to engage students and the public alike with these really incredible interactive digital exhibits that are being designed now. So we've engaged a really experienced exhibit designer to come in to bring the space to life. The gallery is going to have several different components. As you see, on the north wall, labeled 1 and 2, you have a feature wall and what we're calling a dive wall, which I'll give a little more detail about in the next couple of slides. We'll also have these 4 interactive digital tables. And what's labeled 4 along the exterior wall is this LED film component that we'll be adding to the exterior of the glass. So if you jump to the next slide, these are the 2 large digital displays that were being developed in the space. So we have the dive wall, which is this touch-enabled display. It is the full scale of the entire wall. It's going to allow users to dive all the way to the bottom of the Hudson River and tour the marine life that's below. And right to the right of it is what we're calling the feature wall. So this is a really interesting component that has this touchless haptic motion sensor that you can control this projection mapping that's going to be displayed over a dimensionally layered material wall. So you'll be able to see the Hudson shoreline. And if you jump to the next slide, you'll actually see that the content of that feature wall is going to change seasonally. So in each different season, when you get to go and visit the gallery space, you're going to be able to explore all the different wildlife and horticulture that thrive in the park in all the different seasons. And those things will all be controlled through this really interesting kind of touchless motion sensor that users can kind of guide their own journey through this whole experience. If you jump through the next slide, just an example of what you'll see in some of those wildlife illustrations. Really been working closely with the HRPT to get these as accurate as we can, but also bring them to life in a really playful, fun way. And if you go to the next slide, have an example of this LED film display. So what you can't see here because the animation isn't moving on this graphic here, but this LED application that we've decided to deploy on the storefronts here will run the entire length of that living room space on all the community space glass frontage. And really it's going to be, it allows us to put in graphics, display video. I think it really creates this moment where we can engage users as they traverse the whole pier and start to explore. And the one component I didn't touch on earlier was the display tables that we were looking at. Those are all being designed with custom games that are Hudson River Park specific. So games involving wildlife that lives in, below the marine layer, and you can, play as different types of fish, as well as, building your own types of fish, but we're still exploring different options and building those games in close coordination with the Hudson River Park team, who's been very generous with their time and donating a lot of their resources to get this, amazing gallery space off the ground. And Noreen, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add on
I'm
this
here.
classroom
I'm
of the
here
gallery,
with-
please.
I'm here, and I'm here with Tina Walsh as well, whom some of you know. Tina is from our River Project team, and she actually has been leading the effort to provide the content for us here. Could I just ask someone to go back to the diagram, Jeff, at the beginning of the pier, because I do want to point something out. From the get-go, so the space that we're talking about here is, if you're looking at the screen, the one that says community space to the left-hand side. So this is the Hudson River Park education space at Pier 57. It's in a phenomenal part of the pier for us, and it gives us, for the first time ever, really great quality interior space for all of our many educational programs. So Tina can speak more about this, but we're incredibly enthusiastic about that. But I want, and we've presented our education and science programs, I think, to you a couple of times before. If you don't know it, we have an incredibly robust program, and Tina can speak much more knowledgeably than I can about all the many ways we serve people. But one of the things I want to point out is that we are designing these things not just for children, but also for adults. My vision that I've said to the team from the get-go is that on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock, if you've left the restaurant, you should be able to feel like you want to come and learn something, and you don't even know you're going to learn something. You're going to take away joy and discovery about something genuine from the Hudson River and our environment in this space. And that is part of what we're trying to do. And could I just take a second to introduce Tina and just see if she wants to say anything in particular?
Sure.
Tina, I think you're on mute.
Hi. Thank you, Noreen. And I think, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more. This really just highlights Hudson River Park. One of the things that makes us so special is that our mission is to connect New Yorkers and students to the estuarine sanctuary. In between the piers, we have 400 acres of sanctuary waters. And this is going to help bring it to life. A lot of times people look at the Hudson, they see something greenish, something brownish, and think there must not be a lot living in there. When in fact, that's not the case. We have 85 species of fish that call the river home, 200 in the greater Hudson River itself. And just looking at the surface is not the best indicator of the life beneath the surface. So a lot of our programming is designed to bring what's beneath there and show you a window into the Hudson. But what's really unique and special about this opportunity at Pier 57 is that we're going to be able to incorporate technology in this year-round element, to have both physical science elements, scientific tools, and this technological aspect that'll really round out a student experience learning about our local waterways. So it's just been such an amazing experience to turn what's exciting, interesting, and engaging about the Hudson River into these really dynamic games that, as Noreen said, I'm thinking about it from third graders to college students, but then we really expect that adults are going to enjoy learning about this as well. So we're glad we got to show you a taste of it tonight.
You want to give a game teaser? One of the game ideas?
So
just a couple.
yeah, I mean, my favorite game is it's based on the fish that charms everybody, the oyster toadfish. If I've ever given you a presentation, I've probably shown just a picture of this fish's mouth, which is the size of my face. So essentially they're these bottom dwelling fish. They are really charismatic. They croak to attract their mates. They also fight each other. They try to find the best burrow and the best rocks to hide underneath in the Hudson River. And this one tabletop game will actually have you be an oyster toadfish. You're trying to eat other food. Sometimes you try to put something too big in your mouth and that actually might fight you. But then other times you slither over to an oyster cage and it happens to be our Hudson River Park River Project staff monitoring and conducting research in the park. So this is kind of just one way that these activities are really folding in what's living here, but also what's special about the work that we're doing as part of the River Project team at the park.
Thanks, Tina.
I think if we jump to the last slide of the deck. Jeff, if you want to close it out.
Yeah, so that that concludes the presentation. Just to talk about what's coming up next in the short term, as Amy mentioned, you know, Google's occupancy will start in early 22, and the rooftop we expect to open to the public in the spring of 2022. But as I said, if any of you would like a tour and weren't able to make it, we're happy to accommodate that. And I think with that, we can hand it back to the committee and take any questions.
And if the committee, thank you very much for that presentation. I am personally sorry that I was not on the tour. There may be others on the committee, but I want to open it up to the committee to speak. And I see David Luca, I see Leslie. I also have a question, but I'll wait to the end. I see Alan, and let's go in that order. David, you're on, sir.
Oh, hi, thanks. I'm sorry I missed the tour that was recently given, and I'd like to take you up on the offer of scheduling another one. I'm a little curious about circulation on the ground floor plan. It looks like a member of the public entering the pier and trying to walk toward the back would walk through space that's colored blue, which stands for commercial retail. Is that sort of an open space like Chelsea Market is, where you'd be able to walk through even when the kiosks are closed? How does that work, the interaction between public circulation and private space?
That's right. What you're describing is right. So you'd be able to freely walk through. It's a corridor kind of similar to Chelsea Market in some areas, but to go basically from the east end of the pier all the way out to the west end, which is the restaurant space, and then the west end of the apron.
And David, I think some of the coloring is a carryover from the way that Hudson River Park's lease is structured. So, so we obviously, and our lease, you know, we keep all of this information public, by the way, if anyone wants to look. But the original lease, you know, there's a market use, there's office use, there's culture, what's called CEE use, cultural education, entertainment uses. And some of the passageways that were just described are technically part of a zone that is like for market or whatever it is. But obviously we have a high interest in making sure that the public can get to all the great spaces that we're talking about here.
Okay, and could I ask you to describe a little bit more what's going on the green rooftop space? There were two images. One showed kind of a large lawn with a path wandering through it, and the other had like a series of discs on it. Could you speak about what those are?
I don't know, John Ferrante, if you're here and can speak to the discs in particular, but David, to describe it generally, it's two levels, and the central feature, which we actually don't have in the pictures, is what I'll call almost like a stadium seating type arrangement as well, for people to relax, you know, eat. Obviously, Tribeca would use that as well. And then these open lawns. There's also an F&B component up at the top as well, which will be programmed as well. And the access will be, go ahead, Noreen.
Could we maybe bring the image back up, because we can maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk
Rob,
to most of it with regards to the grassy areas, right? One area is all solid grass. The other one look like white discs. That's actually a Google skylights that go above the ramp where the last slide showed the Google sign. They go all the way up to the roof to allow light into the Google space. I think there's 38 or 40 of them total that are embedded within the lawn space up there.
But they are.
Is that part publicly accessible, or is it just like a green roof?
No,
Yeah,
it's 100% publicly accessible. You could stand on them, look down. And like Jeff said, there's a stadium seating on the east side that is towards the end, which attaches to the F&B that's on the roof, which piggybacks the elevators, which is also part of the grand staircase that runs from the center all the way up to the roof.
So
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Just a couple more points on that. The rooftop of the what's being called F&B, but the restaurant pavilion that was designed, that is also public open space. So literally the roof is public open space. And it's kind of like stadium seating. I mean, it would be helpful if you could bring the image back up of the roof, because I think a lot of people probably are interested in this. But Tribeca Film Festival,
Rob, if you can share the presentation again, we could flip, or Allie. I'm not sure who had it.
Neither of us sharing it.
Oh, I'm not sure who's sharing it, Noreen.
Oh, Janine, are you on? Okay.
But the whole roof is open, to Noreen's point. The whole rooftop that you saw in the photos or from an overview, the entire roof space is open with the exception of the trellis system, which is blocked off to public access. And that's literally 3 feet wide on the sides. Otherwise, the whole roof is public access.
Right.
With the
And then what
exception
I was
of, and I
about
will
to,
say the exception of some of the head house where the mechanical equipment is cooling towers and stuff, but
right.
I'm interrupting because I think Janine must be having a technical problem. The recording should not have stopped. This is a public meeting and the recording should be continuing. I'm not going to stop the conversation. I hope that Janine either hears me or catches up with this, and we'll do what we got to do. It's silly to wait for that to go back on. But I just wanted to let you know.
So the other thing I was going to say is that I think of everyone here. Hi, Janine.
Hi, I'm so sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties. Which image did you want me to bring up?
The one of the roof, if you can find that.
And the
Okay,
recording
one second.
stopped, Janine. You might want to check that too.
Okay. Let me just bring this up and then I'll restart.
Janine, I think it's slide 6 that shows
Okay.
the roof.
I'll also mention that the discs that are the skylights, they're not clear. So you're not looking up. You can't, it's like, it's clouded.
they're opaque.
Yeah, yeah.
Good point.
There's one that's like your rendering-ish one that shows not the views from it, but yeah, can we do that one? That one. Okay. So the structure in the center with the tents over it, that's what I was just describing. That's the roof of the kind of F&B space, but that is public as well. So it's like the higher level roof. On the eastern side of that, there are these beautiful wooden steps down that are like stadium seats, but really generous, that are built-in seating, that are wide enough for like lounging on them, frankly. But you can't really see that there, but that's what's being described as kind of just this stadium seating. And when Tribeca Film Festival, of everyone here, I'm the only person that I think has been part of this project for the many, many years. I've gotten old working on this project, but basically the Tribeca Film Festival was always part of this proposal from the day it came in the door, and CB4 has heard about that in the past, but it's been a while. During the main outdoor festival season for the Tribeca Film Festival every year, they'll be doing films up here. And that seating that I just described obviously will be seating for that purpose, but otherwise it's a place where you can have lunch, hang out, talk to your friends, whatever. And then there are the lawn spaces as well.
Right, and if I could just point out the pictures of the roof where you saw the white discs, that was taken from that rooftop vantage.
Okay.
During the film festival, is the roof closed to the public and just for the film? How often is the roof closed to the public?
It's it's limited in our lease, Marty, but basically the film festival, a lot of what they do is free to start with, but there's a 2-week period basically every year where they do the film festival. And there are requirements in the lease that you've heard about previously. I frankly don't remember exactly, but this is all part of our public review process, before we entered into the lease.
And without getting too technical, the rest of the year, the roof is open to the public.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few times a year we've negotiated the ability for us to have a few events a year. The same goes for the general tenant. But for the most part, it's going to be public open space, the way our other piers are. I mean, occasionally you might come to a pier and there's a big walkathon on it or whatever it is. It's similar to that.
Leslie is next.
Thanks, Marnie. Thanks, guys. I was part of the tour. David, you have to go to this place and you have to get a tour. It is really amazing. I think, I don't want to speak for everyone that was on the tour, but I think we were all super, super impressed, guys. So thanks a lot. In fact, after the tour, I posted it on social media, and I can't tell you how many comments I got from people on the east side that said, why don't we ever have places like this on the east side? There was like a whole slew of them. And I said, too bad, we have Hudson River Park. My one thing I did want to ask about, and I was talking to Jeffrey about this, and he's sorry he couldn't be here because he also wanted to express his enthusiasm for the project, was, and this is a little nebulous, but when we were in there, it was pretty hot on a cool day. For the cooling systems, the HVAC, that whole thing, we know it's an old building. We know it's not built from scratch, but is there any way to get green energies in there to cool and heat that place, or any way to incorporate green energies, or how does that go? And I have
that's a great question. And the simple answer is yes. We actually as a company, RXR, we are 100% green energy, with the exception of buying Con Ed transmission delivery. We have a commitment. We've gone green energy here on the electric side. We're right now buying wind from the Midwest, waiting for New York to get green and green the grid, and then we'll be buying RECs from New York.
But in particular to this project?
Yes, the electricity, all the electricity at the project is green.
Okay.
Go ahead, Leslie.
No, sorry, go ahead. Someone
No, that's okay.
Oh, okay. And I think this is a really good example. I know there's always the dialogue or the conversation about private space on public on public space, private space. I'm really hoping that this is going to be a really good example of how they both can work together. How, the Google is there, and it's also open a lot to the public. So I think people are going to be looking at this space for that also, because that conversation kind of flows in and out of our parks. I don't want to say specifically Hudson River Park Trust, but sometimes. And then the last thing, Noreen, you and I were talking about this, I'm really excited about the educational prospects of those spaces. And we need free family programming on weekends. Everyone will go if you have it. But, one last thing. If Google doesn't mind, when we get this stuff up and running, and I don't know if it would be Google or if it would be necessarily Hudson River Park Trust, or maybe together, when we do have this educational programming, if maybe you can consider presenting to ACES, which is our committee, our education committee, that kind of goes over these free programs, and then we can connect you guys with the different schools or the different, youth programs that might be interested, that wouldn't normally get access to places like this. Thank you.
I'll just speak to that really quickly. So we are in the process of currently developing our plans of how we're going to engage those spaces and allow for them to be bookable by the community. And so we're working on the means and mechanisms and some of the criteria for that. And we plan on coming back to the community board when we have that more fully developed. So there will absolutely be time for input from this group and from the ACES group, which we've spoken to as well.
But on the trust side, in the meantime, I'm sure that is, Leslie, music to Tina's ears, not just for Pier 57, but just generally for everything she's trying to do. So I think her comment would be, say when.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you,
exactly. We have relationships with a lot of the schools surrounding that area, but always looking to build more and just continue to have contacts in the community. So thank you.
Alan, you're next.
Hi, thank you, everybody, on this project. This is going to be one fantastic place to be, absolutely. And thanks, Leslie, for that plug. Robin, quick question on the market hall, if you can. Will your vendors be changing from time to time?
What is that about the turnover of the vendors? I'm sorry.
In the market hall, you're going to be changing, bringing in, or as the
yeah,
entrepreneurs get going on it?
there's going to be a plan of actually one kiosk is likely to have a focus on a actual rotating, bringing in different vendors at least twice a year. But also, I think we've seen, you know, in the operation of market halls and food halls like this, there's certainly, you know, the anticipation of some turnover with that. So, you know, likely within, you know, 2 years, you have some natural turnover. Yeah.
Okay. All right, super. Thank you. And thank you again for a marvelous place for New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
We're excited to deliver it.
We're excited to get it. Marinella, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm looking forward to meeting you outside of the Zoom context, and you're next.
Thanks, Marty, and thank you for this presentation. It really does look like an awesome space. I'm so sorry I missed the last tour. But if you guys plan to have a tour maybe in the evening or on a weekend, I would love to join in. I just have need some clarification. So the community space, is that going to be for the exclusive use of the Hudson River Park? Is that right? So any sort of
No. There are dedicated spaces that Hudson River Park is going to be using, which were the ones that were featured in the presentation with the glass and the games that Noreen and Tina had spoken to. And then there's other spaces that will be flexible. So it's going to look pretty empty, but there's going to be movable desks and chairs and partitions and things like that that will be available so that we can bring or we can host a variety of community uses in that space pretty easily, but they will mostly be, it'll be like fairly blank to allow for that flexibility. And then again, we're figuring out exactly what the criteria and the means and mechanisms of how different groups can access that space and book that space, including the community board for your meetings, which I will prompt you guys to schedule as soon as the scheduling comes available. But again, for things like that, you know, we have no intentions of using that space for Google or and we wanted to make the ground floor as community accessible as possible. And so those are meant for community groups and community access.
So the booking procedure or the booking system would be managed by, who would be managing it?
So Jamestown is our partner that manages a lot of the processes, and they're going to be managing the ground floor. But Google is going to be involved in this, and then we'll consult with the community board to make sure that we're meeting our shared goals.
Understood. And then for the market hall, have you thought of the criterion for vendor selection? Is there going to be thought given to minority-owned businesses from the area? Is that something that needs to be threshed out, or it's already been thought through?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're not going to limit ourselves on a stringent criteria. I think what we really want to do is cultivate a space that, you know, incorporates a great mix of small businesses, new businesses, you know, brings in the opportunity for, you know, entrepreneurs to launch new concepts. But we have not and are not planning on laying out a, you know, specific set of criteria for folks to meet that. We want to build something that's really successful, that's engaging to the community and as an amenity to the community, and also acts as this great incubator for small businesses in the neighborhood.
And the goal, and Rob had mentioned this on the tour, you know, the goal is to bring the spaces pretty as close to built out as possible, and so that the barriers for a small business that wants to move in are lower than having to fit out a white space or a retail space. And it's similar to our goals that we try and meet at Chelsea Market. We know the food and the local businesses is a priority, and so we always have that in mind when we're doing our leasing. But the kiosks, there's going to be 17 of them, is that correct, Rob?
Yep, up to
17 of them, and they are meant to be open, so they're not blocking any views, and they're meant to be as turnkey as you can possibly get while still providing them flexibility.
Understood. And then finally, and I'm sure you guys have given this thought, but could you maybe talk about accessibility of the entire area for people with disabilities, for example?
I mean, broadly, the response would be that there's broad accessibility both through the central corridor and then elevators up to the roof, and then ADA accessibility through elevators up to that upper portion that we described, when Noreen was showing the rendering of the overall building. So, I mean, broadly, we've designed this with accessibility in mind, and I think we've accomplished that. We'd love to show it to you.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the Inclinator?
Oh, the Google ramp and associated area.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to it, just in the spirit of, having a real mind and eye towards inclusivity from the beginning of the design process, because the pier was a functional place for ships to come and be loaded. The way that goods came up to be loaded onto the boats was via a large ramp, which you can't miss if you come on the tour. And it crosses from the ground floor all the way up to the third floor. And when Google was doing the design and the concepting, we kept the ramp because we thought it was a really great entry experience. And we decided we wanted to make sure, in the spirit of inclusivity and accommodations for folks, that anyone who would typically need to come in through a separate ADA entrance would also be provided for in the same fashion and have the same entry experience. So we've actually got a device called an Inclinator, which again, you can't miss if you come to see it on the tour. It's being installed still. We're having some shipping delays. It's coming from Italy. But the Inclinator is a place for folks to not walk, but travel alongside people who are walking up the pier in a mechanized booth that takes them up the same path of travel. So they have the same auditory and visual experience. So we're really excited about that. We've got a host of folks here at Google who focus on accessibility and accommodations, and we have a lot of teammates who have accessibility and accommodation needs that we want to be inclusive of. So definitely a consideration for Google as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brad.
Good evening, everybody. 4 points. When we talked about in the past, was there a big plaque or interactive piece telling everybody about the history of the pier? Number two, unless I missed it, the bulkhead down below was going to be a shared space, even though it was Google. I don't know if I missed that. And Noreen, maybe I also want to talk about the activation of the water on the south side. If there's anything happening there.
Why don't I jump in on these? Actually, this is feedback that I was going to bring back to our colleagues at RXR and Google. I was talking yesterday with the American Society of Civil Engineers, which is very interested in having that kind of plaque, Brad, that you mentioned, that talks about the unique engineering, which is why this pier is a historic structure. On the tour, John Ambrosini, who gave the tour from RXR, talked about that history and the fact that the pier was designed with caissons that were designed by, using what the engineer Emil Prager had learned developing landing craft for World War II. So I think that that is still a really, really excellent idea. I can say that in the Hudson River Park space, at a minimum, happy to do that, but I would guess that others would be very interested to talk about that as well. The caissons, there are 3 caissons. One caisson is basically back of house for supplies and restaurant, like other things that the pier needs to operate. One caisson is for bikes, trash, and the 74 vehicles that are allowed in the pier by virtue of the ULURP review. And the middle caisson, the idea is for that to be an arts-oriented use, and that the public would be able to access that one. As I said on the tour, it doesn't mean automatically for free. The trust lease requirement for the CEE spaces does allow people to charge an admission charge or, charge for the cultural spaces. As you saw, the spaces on the ground floor are free. So the arts institution that may be in one of the caissons might charge. It's not quite cooked yet, so we're not able to talk about that fully, but it is a terrific use of the caisson, I think, and it would be the type of use where the general public would be able to access it. Did I answer those two questions for you, Brad? And then the activation one we can do, or the water I can do separately, but so far so good?
Yeah, I remember they told us a story, the owner of Google went down there and said, we want to activate it and we will share it. Just want to make sure that gets stuck to. Yes, and I'd love to talk about the water, and then also on the bike pathway, obviously you're going to have guards, and we could talk to that.
Right. So the water, Jeff should feel free to jump in, or John, but the lease with Hudson River Park does include an option for use of the water for vessels north and south sides of the pier. And we assessed that basic concept, but not fully in our environmental review. So if someone wanted to do a marina or something else like that, there's probably additional environmental review as well as permits that would have to be done. At this point, there is a lot of activation of the water throughout the park. I think that Jeff should speak to this, but my sense is that they're focused on first things first, which is everything that you're seeing, as well as leasing the remainder of the spaces. And the trust, at least, has not had any conversations with them about any more water uses. Jeff, do you want to add to that?
You hit the nail on the head. We're very focused on getting this project completed, and that's the real focus right now.
I appreciate that, but it is a pier and it was used for boats and ships. And I don't think we should, and there's enough people around to be thinking about where we're going with it. I get understanding opening up and getting some rent. I get that, but I don't want to lose a focus on that. It looks beautiful. I can't wait to see it. Congratulations to everybody. What a lot of hard work. I would say one other thing. I understand you're buying green energy. That's great. But we had discussed multiple times that we were looking for actually devices on the pier that would be green. A windmill, solar, wave power, walking on ramps that produce power when people walk. We just don't see any of that, and that's a shame.
Thank you, Brad. I'll repeat some of that when it's my turn. You're done, sir?
It looks great. Congratulations to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ina?
Oh, one more thing. Please post your jobs on our website. We'd love to hire locally. Thank you.
Yeah, that's super important. I hope that's not forgotten because it's something the community really appreciates, the job notices. I do second Brad's concern and appreciate purchasing energy from windmills offsite in the Midwest. But I know we did discuss it, and I just wish or hope that the trust and Google will re-examine any potential possibility for solar panels, or wind might be difficult. I don't know, not an expert there, but something to think about. It might not generate a lot of energy, but at least it can serve as an example to the public, especially young folks, that this is something that is right there that they can learn about, that that everyone is in the community is concerned about. So just put a bee in your bonnet about that. Maybe not for actual a lot of generating a lot of power, but as an educational standpoint. Let's see. I have to say this is like the third tour that I've had. Previously, it was under Carly. and Angela is doing obviously a bang up job in the team. And I just have to say, I am astonished at how it's coming to fruition. And it goes without saying that a lot of sweat, blood, tears, energy has gone into this by this team, and certainly the community board has been a part of that process. So I would like to pat everybody on the back, because it's rare to have a project of this scale in particular come to fruition in line with everything we've been discussing for many, many years. So, I think I could speak for others, although I rarely like to do so, to thank everybody involved for that. And I'll make one other point, but I do have to say before that the Inclinator, and I thought I had that wrong, but it is the Inclinator, is spectacular, because that was a big question we had. Look, there's this huge ramp, and we had discussed during the early walkthroughs about accessibility and so forth and so on. And the idea of doing, somebody actually must have done a lot of research, because to find an Italian company to fabricate this Inclinator, and I can't wait to see it in operation. Again, I think speaks volumes above and beyond providing access, equal access, visible access. I think it makes a statement to our young people and the community at large that yes, we are thinking about everyone, not just part of the community. So love the fact that it's visible, especially. The one question I had was capacity. If it's anything like the High Line or anything like Little Island, I can see this as being extremely popular. And I was just wondering if there's any thought or anything yet set in place, even as options to deal with crowd control and capacity.
Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Is it the capacity of the Inclinator or of the entire building?
Of the entire building. I mean, certainly maybe, breaking it down into certain portions. Let's face it, sunny, warm days, the rooftop's going to be, very popular. How are you going to work with interior as well as external traffic flow? Maybe externals, crossing the bike path and all this other, that's another topic. But just in terms of the draw from the public, I could see this being just a major popular attraction.
Yeah, I think the short answer is that the building is just now starting to come online, with City Winery and such, and so we haven't had the full activation yet, and it will be an evolving process as we see how the public uses it. How they come up to the roof and use the apron and the public spaces in the middle. And so that's something we're going to have to continue to focus on and make sure that we manage through that as we see how the building is used and comes alive. But it's a great point, Tina.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I know when Little Island, started off, I mean, it was just, you had to, sign up ahead of time, and they were timed entrances, and it was like, okay, it's so popular that we have to limit our enjoyment to a certain extent by limiting the spontaneity aspect of visiting a park. So something to park in your minds, and again, congratulations, all is looking really good.
Yeah, and I think another part of this is that a lot of the pieces of the building are going to come on in different phases. And so I think it's something that we can keep an eye on. And again, I'll put my email in the chat, and then you guys can reach out to Allie and Rob too with feedback if you start to feel like you see it heading in a direction. But that's an active conversation that we can continue to have.
Thank you. Roberta, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I did want to echo Marinelle's earlier request for a potential half hour, whether it be early or later afternoon, early evening, or weekend tour. I think that there is likely a small constituency for that here on the committee. My first question, I heard you mentioned earlier the potential for bike storage, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more detail about that particular plan or part of the space.
The current bike storage in the building, and I'm going to ask Amy to correct me if I'm wrong, is meant for the Google tenants. And I don't believe there's public bike parking in the building.
I believe that's right. We can circle back on that, but I believe that's right.
That's correct. It's mostly Googlers who have the bike space. There is City Bike right on the corner of 14th Street. There's other access points, and there are bike tie-up points within the frontage or the head house space in front of the pier. So that's programming wise, that's what we had space for.
No, that makes sense. I did want to perhaps, and this might depend on capacity and what flows look like, request that either Google or the Park Trust consider adding either corrals or internal space to allow for access via bicycle, given the limited accessibility of the facility via traditional public transportation. But that may be a question to revisit at a later time, but just one piece of that. Somewhat relatedly and a little bit outside of the scope of the project, I was curious if there had been discussions with the Department of Transportation to improve pedestrian and cyclist access, particularly along 15th Street, crossing from, I guess that would be 10th Avenue, across that little park over there, and then over to 15th Street. It's a really narrow entrance from the highway to the Greenway, and then from the Greenway over to the pier. And I could very easily see there being, some conflict between cyclist and pedestrian and cars for that space, and it becoming a safety issue. And I was curious if there had been any discussions with DOT to maybe increase the amount of pedestrian and cyclist space, or to protect additional space at that crossing.
So maybe I'll field that one. There was a huge amount of planning with both departments of transportation as part of the ULR process when the project was being planned. And then since then, even I would say that just bikes and e-bikes and everybody, everything keeps growing as far as this goes. And Jeffrey and I, Jeffrey wearing his professional hat at Meatpacking, and I at Hudson River Park talk about such issues a lot. Our advisory council actually for Hudson River Park has an upcoming discussion with both the city and state departments of transportation to generally talk about all things kind of bike, e-bikes largely, but not exclusively that. Because I think at some point, the infrastructure that exists on all of our streets and, and in some cases the park as well was built at an earlier era when people weren't using bikes as much, right? And certainly not e-bikes. So, technically for this project actually implemented RXR. It did a lot of improvements for even necking down the distance between crosswalks by creating kind of expanded sidewalk space, for example, at 14th Street Park in a couple of places. So there's nothing more that they are obligated to do as part of this. I think the question you're raising is really a macro question about our street network and our sidewalk network. And we're happy to, we are in fact engaged in conversations like that, but no one has a specific solution yet. I think we're all in the education phase.
Thank you very much. David.
Yeah, this is a bit of an aside, but it has to do with a park, and this is the Waterfront Parks Environment Committee, and it has to do with Google. Almost 10 years ago, when Jamestown Properties owned Chelsea Market, they sought a zoning variance to build a tower over the west end of the market, and there was quite a bit of community opposition because it would rob the High Line of light and air, and specifically cast shadows on the High Line at the 8th Avenue Square feature, which is the grandstand feature that bridges over 8th Avenue. It's very popular. And I guess this is a question for you, Angela. Does Google have plans now to go forward with that tower? Because when Google bought the building, it bought the development rights that were earned almost 10 years ago. I would kind of hope that finding space on this pier and at St. John's Terminal would keep the tower from happening. But can you tell us anything about what plans are for building out that space?
Yeah, I mean, we do have long-term plans to build out that space as part of the rezoning for that and Google's occupancy there. We also have committed to come to the community board to update regularly on that project as well. We did do our last update, I believe, in March of this year. I can check on the exact timing I will confirm on which committee that update goes to. But the update for this year was that there was nothing substantial planned for the upcoming year, but we plan to come back again next spring to update again.
Thank you.
Chelsea Land Use is my guest, David. Thank you very much. Alice, you're on.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to follow up in regards to the ADA that you mentioned before. I understand you have some accommodations for those who are unable to get from floor to floor. Would there be any consideration for those such as using Braille for the visually impaired?
You're asking with respect to signage and other
Yes.
components of the project?
Yes.
I imagine what the way I'd answer that, I guess, is obviously everything we're doing is fully compliant with ADA regulations. I will get back to you on the specific question about how Braille is applied.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, everybody. I have to say that I am amazingly proud of this committee and the questions that you've asked, because you've asked all the questions that I had noted. And so I'm going to be very brief, but I want to repeat them because they are important to the committee. I hope to see something about the history of the pier, not just in the Hudson River Park Trust space or the Google space, but in the public spaces. I hope to see more obvious solar. It is wonderful that large corporations are buying electricity through Con Edison that is green. That's a positive move, but the need for local solar and whether it's wind or solar voltaic, as one of the speakers said, is a very good public education, and it's not irrelevant. We've already talked about open to the public. We have the Hudson River Yards that was promised to be open to the public, and some places in it aren't. I don't want to get into that discussion. I am really delighted that this site is open to the public on the lower floor and mostly open to the public on the top floor. Job opportunities are an important thing to post on our website, please. Local jobs are important to us. And finally, we want a new tour. I'd love to go on one. Thank you for this presentation a lot. Now putting on my rather than my questioner's hat, my co-chair hat, my gut says that this is a report to the committee and that there is, correct me if I'm wrong, no reason for us to write a letter. All we need to do is say thank you very much for this presentation, and we look forward to the next update. Any committee member want to say anything else?
Agreed, Marty.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I am so sorry that I wasn't on that. I'm speaking for the several of us who weren't. We are so sorry that we weren't on the tour, and we were looking forward to the opportunity. I might even find my way down there just to walk around the perimeter by myself.
Yeah, I mean, if you stop by anytime during the business day, we're there. We have people on site. Just feel free to reach out. We'll get you the whole tour. And I will give you this little tip. Come now before it gets cold. Be a different kind of tour.
Are you saying that RXR doesn't want to go outside in the cold?
Oh no, we go outside all the time. We'll go up on the roof in the cold. It doesn't matter to us. I'm just, everybody tells me I'm going to come and see the place, and I said, yeah, don't come in the summer. Come in the winter time when it's, live with us.
So Marty, we'll arrange a sneak peek for you and any other community board members. You can just reach out directly to me or to Angela or Noreen, any of us, and we'll figure out a time.
I will say, I did keep promising that I was going to write my email in the chat, and there's no chat. So I sent it to Janine, and I asked you to share my email with everybody.
Yeah, I just sent the email to everybody. So if you didn't get it, just let me know.
Thanks so much. Listen, I just wanted to jump in there. Maybe I was having some kind of a senior brain thing. But I thought I did remember that when we discussed the caissons being so far down, that the temperature would always be somewhat consistent because of the depth, just like you would find in a cave, so to speak. So going back to finish off the environmental and energy and heating and cooling systems, and is that correct?
Yes, the caissons go with the ocean temperature because they are so far down. They sit about 60 feet. With their giant concrete floating boxes, which, is kind of crazy in and of itself being concrete. But yes, they are susceptible to the same temperature as the ocean, which runs about 55, 60 degrees year round.
Great.
So that's another comment about using available energy and cooling. And we are concerned, our committee has consistently been concerned with displaying and using locally available solar energy, whether it's geothermal or solar or et cetera. I don't have to go through it. You heard us, and I hope you'll on your next report, you'll tell us something about what you're doing in that regard. Again, thank you so much. We have another presentation to go to. They've been very patient, but I hope that they have also been informed by this really exciting presentation. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks all.
Our next presenter is Hudson Guild, and I guess, Ken, you're going to be the presenter. Welcome.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks. I'm actually going to introduce James Green as well in just a minute, but yeah, it'll be James and me. And really happy to be with you all here tonight, following up on what was a pretty remarkable presentation before ours. I don't know that we can promise, a couple 100 feet out into the water, but we have a very interesting and I think important idea to share with you, and we're hoping that you'll agree and that you'll express support for it. Really happy to be here tonight to share a proposal to build on a successful academics and athletics program that we have started. We want to bring it closer to the community here in CB4, and we want to add an important new amenity in the community that'll be available to everybody. Our goal tonight, and we'll go through a presentation with you in just a minute, right? But our goal tonight is to ask this committee to use its authority to express support for our proposal. We have shared this idea with the Parks Department. We've had very good conversations with them. Rightly, they want to know what this committee and what the community has to say as we continue it. Here with me today is James Green. James is a leader in the community squash world, and he's also one of the founders of Open Squash, which is a community squash facility just east of CB4, 39th and 5th, and they've been our partner in this terrific and meaningful after-school initiative. They've been a major force in this. James has been a major force in this, and you're going to hear a little bit more about them in just a minute. There may also be some folks attending from the Parks Department. While they're not an official part of our presentation, as I said, we've been engaged in conversation with them for quite a while about this. So looking to the PowerPoint, I'm going to start and share our first couple of slides, and then James is going to step in as well. Right, so the goal here is to build on academics and athletics here in the neighborhood. We can go to the next slide. Right, so the program that we're talking about here is the Hudson Guild after school and summer camp programming. As many of you know, and happy that we have already had you all on the community board back into our facilities for your meetings, and looking forward to having you all back in our facilities again very soon. Many of you are familiar with the work that Hudson Guild does, right, and our work with early childhood and older adults and mental health and arts programming and community building. And a very big part of what we do is after school and summer camp programming, right, kids in sort of the K through 8 age range, right, 5 to 13 years old. Our after school and summer camp programming are free and accessible programs, right? And they give kids the opportunity to keep learning as the day continues after school, and gives their caregivers, their parents, their grandparents, whoever they are spending their time with, the chance to go to work or go to school or take care of other family responsibilities, knowing that their child is safe and well cared for, and with people who are interested in their development. Our services include homework help and social emotional development, skills development, and importantly, fun. Open Squash grows out of the community of squash players here in New York City. James will talk a little bit more about it in a few minutes, but there is both among the world of people who play squash for fun, for recreation, or competitively. There's also a very important component to it, to making this sport accessible to a broader group of people. That's how I learned about it. I am not a squash player, but have gotten to really learn a ton about it in the last couple of years as we have been working with Open Squash. And just before the pandemic, they opened a really extraordinary facility on 39th Street that is a community squash center. And a big part of what they did was make sure that there was programming available for kids in the Hudson Guild programming to learn about the sport, and more importantly, to learn the big lessons about the sport: competitive play and fair play and self-determination and hard work. And so we have teamed up to work together. So we can go to the next slide, please. Right, so here you see a photograph of some of the kids in our program at the Open Squash Center. So we started the program in January of 2020, got the doors open. Open Squash sort of took the lead, made sure that transportation and equipment and food were all provided at no cost to the kids in our program. And we were transporting kids as part of after school over to the Open Squash Center for after school activities. That obviously came to a screeching halt in March of that year. Like so many things, I am very happy to say that this summer we started up again, and we had 60 kids who went through a really fantastic summer camp program, a summer camp activity that was part of our summer camp programming. So as part of all the other things you do at Hudson Guild Summer Camp, a cohort of 60 kids all got to go to the Open Squash Center to learn and to play, to have fun, and to sort of pick up on the lessons that they learned in squash. And I'm really happy to say that moving into the academic year, all of that programming is continuing, right? And the goal is always to combine the academic support and the social emotional learning and the extended day programming with fun and the lessons that kids can learn in an organized sporting activity. We can go on to the next slide. So we've been doing this now with Open Squash in their 39th Street facility, and it's been fantastic. But we'd like to bring the physical squash space closer to home so that we can develop the program some more and work, frankly, more easily and more seamlessly as we develop this programming. So the goal is to build a pilot program, a couple of pilot program squash courts here in Chelsea Park, right outside my window. There's a set of handball courts out there, and we'll take you through that in just a minute, right? But the goal is to have those that activity right here nearby. So it's just outside the back door of our Elliott Center, making all of the issues related to transportation and moving kids and time efficiency a lot easier than traveling to Midtown, and making sure that if a kid is interested, that he or she can more easily move into the program, come and play on off time, and so make the connection much more efficient between Hudson Guild and the after-school squash program. As part of this, if we built these pilot squash courts, we would also include some important sort of improvement to that part of Chelsea Park, which is just east of the big field. So between the big open field and the Department of Health building, in that space there, which would allow us to run the program, allow us to do competitive and interactive programs with other urban community squash programs. James will talk a little bit more about some of the other programs that exist in the city of New York, right? But use this as a hub for kids as they get into competitive and intramural activities, and then also make sure that those courts are available to anybody in the community who either already plays squash or might want to learn about this sport that more people have gotten interested in. So our goal is to, on 3 of those handball courts, build a pilot set of squash courts to be used in this programming and to be used by the community. So we can move to the next slide. And James is going to talk a little bit about community squash and a little bit more about the physical structures.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And thanks for having us. So I'm James Green. I'm one of the founders of Open Squash. We founded Open Squash because we loved the sport and we wanted it to be more accessible to everyone. It's not a sport that is very widely accessible. It's in a lot of private clubs and places like that. And or put another way, we just wanted to bring something that brings us joy into everyone else and bring everyone else joy. And as Ken said, we've built one center on 39th and 5th, and 25% of the membership there receive an economic discount. And that's sort of core to our mission. We are a fully registered 501c3 nonprofit. These are some of the reasons why we think squash is so amazing. If you haven't played it, one of the things that is amazing that happens with squash is the community that it brings. It builds an incredible community, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that being part of a strong community that will support you in all the aspects of your life is really, really meaningful. And you know, it's a pretty diverse community. We're aiming to make it as diverse as the kaleidoscope that is New York City. And you know, I know that when something goes wrong in my life, I can go to my squash community for help. And you know, the community is just incredibly strong and vibrant. Again, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that being healthy is really important. Squash is an incredibly dynamic court. When you walk on into a squash court, I think you might at the beginning think it's pretty small until you start playing, and then it's really big. And it's a very, very dynamic athletic activity, which as several people have rated it as one of the most demanding and things that you have to be most fit to do. It fits with New York because the footprint is small and the kit you need is de minimis. And moreover than that, if even that de minimis expense is something, we will provide it. So one of the things that we're going to do is provide some programming and provide equipment for those that don't need it. So then with these courts, all you would need is to be able to have shoes and shorts and a t-shirt, and off you go. If you don't have a racket, we'll give you one. If you don't have a ball, we'll give you one. If you have your own, then that's great. Ken's better at speaking about the enhancements to the green space beyond the squash courts. We are suggesting to pay for all of these courts. We've actually designed them from scratch. I'll show you about them at the end. Ken's also talked to you about the fact that we provide this after-school activity. We do provide it entirely for free to all of the kids. Because we've seen such great success. And in fact, the next slide will talk a little bit about some of the impact that squash has had on kids that are given access to it. And one of the most amazing things about squash is the trust and understanding that it builds between its membership. So when you're on court, one of the things you have to do in squash is you have to try to be in the middle of the court. We call it being on the tee. And so everyone's fighting to be right in the middle of the court. And there are rules about how you can do that and how you can't. And learning how to deal with another person like that when you're under pressure is just a fantastic learning and character building experience. And it's one of the things that builds the community, because you go through these moments together and you just get closer and stronger together. The sport, because it is so physically demanding, requires great mental strength as well to get through it, which, I hesitate to call it discipline because that comes with some negative connotations, but you have to learn to really marshal all of your resources to be good at this sport, which is then useful in other aspects of life. And as I started at the beginning, it's just fun. It brings joy to everyone in the community, and that's why we do it. Let's go to the next slide. There is an organization called the Squash and Educational Alliance that supports programs like this across the country and shares learnings, etc. And 99% of kids who participate in these programs go on to attend college, which is just fantastic. And that is the sort of outcomes that we're looking for here. We're looking to make sure that we can help the children who are in Manhattan from Hudson Guild go on to college, and anything we can do to help that, we are going to do. These urban programs have had incredibly strong and positive impacts on the communities that they serve, and we're part of that. Let's go on to the next slide. Why these particular handball courts? Why are we looking at converting them? Because they're next to Hudson Guild. There are about 2,500 handball courts in New York City. So obviously we could pick other ones. And in fact, there is one other court that went up as a trial. You can see that it's down in Hamilton Fish Park on the Lower East Side. So this will be the next 3 courts that are built. Our design is actually slightly different from the original one, a little more robust. And so we want to convert half of the handball courts there. We want to leave the other half for the other people who play handball, along with the other 2,500 courts that are in the city. Take 3 of them and make them for squash. The courts are ideally located right by Hudson Guild, so that the kids there can have their after-school program there. And of course, they're not so far from us, so that when people become really good at it and they want to have continuing education, we can provide that at our own facility. So it's just a great location for what we're trying to do. Next slide. So this is about the courts themselves. I'm going to go through it a little quickly, but if you have questions about this, we might revisit it. These are courts of our own design that are built specifically to withstand the rigors of the New York City environment in every way, both the environment itself and making sure that they can stand up to the use. We're doing this in conjunction with the parks, so it may be that these courts get slightly redesigned as we go through. Obviously, we're going to do whatever we can with the Parks Department to make sure that they are robust, they stay up, that they're built appropriately, that they're accessible, etc. We think we've got all of that, but you never know. We're going to leave the handball court wall as it is. The side walls are built of something called phenolic resin. Actually, I think you can go to the next slide. In fact, you can just go to the next slide because I'm going to talk about what they built. So the front wall stays as it is. The side walls are built of this phenolic resin panels, which has the same properties of glass, but is actually a plastic, and so it's more durable, but it plays like glass and it feels like glass. That's just very, very strong. The back wall is pre-engineered industrial grade glass, the sort of thing you'd have in a storefront window. And then the outside exterior walls are exterior grade fiberboard. It's called MDF for those of you that know what construction materials are. The floor is a proven outdoor floor that has been used in other use cases beyond squash. And there's sort of interior structure, steel and aluminum to support all of that. And I think we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so those are the sort of conceptually the structural pieces, right? It would be about using that 6-court space, taking the western side of that 6-court space, using the 3 courts on the western side to build these structures that would be operated very much like tennis courts in a public park, right? So they would be subject to all of the park's rules for a public amenity, and would be, so if any person who wanted to play or learn about squash would go into the park's reservation system, like one does if they want to play tennis or use some other parks facility that is scheduled, and they'd be able to sign up and use it. But in addition to that, we would schedule out with them time so that kids in the after-school program and in the summer camp program could use this facility as part of the after-school academics and athletics activity. You can actually jump to the next slide, please. The cost for all of this would be covered by Open Squash and Hudson Guild working together, but Open Squash has agreed to take on the primary responsibility for covering the costs, and as well sort of the ongoing maintenance, the programming that is not subject to parks rules and systems, cameras for both security and recording matches. And the court booking system would actually, sorry, it's a little bit of a change, but the court booking system would be managed by the Parks Department, only because it should be publicly accessible the way any other system, reservation system for a parks amenity should be. That's the idea that we are looking to pursue here, and hoping that that you all will see the value in. Happy to share more information about it with you, and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. We are now going to open for questions, and Roberta has her hand up real quick.
Sure. So the first question I wanted to ask was whether or not there would be any associated charge with the reservation system for most tennis courts. operated by the Parks Department. There is, I believe, a seasonal fee in order to reserve courts, though I'm pretty sure the court just below us in Hudson River Park isn't, and some other courts that are operated by the state are not. Would this be a fee for reservation system?
Go ahead, James. Right.
Yeah. We are talking with the parks about whether or not to do that. We certainly, there'll be an application process to waive that fee for people, but it'll either be non-existent, de minimis, or de minimis plus you can apply to have it waived. One of the principles we have is to try to be self-sustaining. So we try to build systems that then are sustainable without the need to raise money afterwards. And so the things that we will provide, like ongoing maintenance and rackets and programming, we would like to be covered by court booking costs in order to make sure that it just stays healthy and robust as an entity in and of itself. So no more than that, which as I said, we hope will be de minimis, and even that de minimis will be waived if you apply for it.
Wonderful. I did want to just express, I live near Chelsea Park. While I'm not a huge user of the handball courts myself, I know that a lot of neighbors, every time I walk by the park, I see people usually working on a tennis serve or playing handball. And I'm sure that there is interest in maybe using these new facilities and moving from a free option to something that is paid may either annoy some community members, or for some it might be cost prohibitive. And so it's nice to see that there might be an option to waive those fees, especially for residents.
There always will. I mean, even for our main facility, we do that. As I said, the Hudson Guild program is entirely free. So that's the sort of core component. Is our core mission is to make it accessible to everybody. So if at any point we make it inaccessible to someone, we have failed in our mission. So both if we do this and you ever see it happen, give me a call, because it's not supposed to work that way. So yeah.
Roberta, sorry, the other thing I would say about that is to a large extent, we will also, and this is not to put the responsibility on them, but for obvious reasons, we would in many ways follow Parks' lead on this and how they manage this kind of stuff in other locations, right? Because it would make sense, for them to have a significant say in the process. So that I think would be a big driver in this. One other thing that I think is noteworthy is that in times when the courts were not being used for squash playing, a person could still practice tennis serves. A person could still, whether they may not be regulation handball, but they could still play handball inside those facilities. If it were open and there were no, for non-squash activities. There's nothing about the structure that would prohibit or compete with hitting a tennis ball or any other kind of ball sport.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's great. I think that the only potential concern is if we are converting community space that's free into one that's paid, but it sounds like we'll get more details about that at a later time. I also wanted to confirm that the hours will match the park hours, the bookable hours, and not be shorter or more limited than the overall park hours.
It would be, that's correct.
Okay, and then final question would be, you mentioned cameras. Who would own and have access to that footage? I only ask that for potential security reasons, if that's the Parks Department, if that's Hudson Guild.
Yeah, so we've worked through this with the Parks Department. We have a system of our own that when you've made a reservation, it records it and gives it to you. So it doesn't stay on the camera. It doesn't go to anybody else. It's actually records it on YouTube and makes it private to you on YouTube. That's it. Doesn't go anywhere else. So that's the entire use case.
Interesting. And do people have the option to disable that out of curiosity?
Yes, they do. Yes, yes, they do. So you can just opt out of it, then you don't have it.
Great.
Thank you very much, Brad.
I want to bring my kid there. I don't have a racket. Is there gonna be like a box with a code to use, like City Bike to use, and a ball and a racket? Or let's say I'm a kid at Hudson Guild and I want to bring my friends there. I don't have a racket. Is that something to look at?
Yeah,
Brad, I can tell you, I'll second question first. You're a Hudson Guild kid and you bring 3 of your neighbors who are not either Hudson Guild kids or not Hudson Guild squash kids. There will be sufficient equipment for you and your friends. So that one is quite easy. I don't see any reason why the Guild also couldn't manage easily a sort of, public borrow, program to pick up a racket and a ball easily enough right there in the park, and you'd come to the Elliott Center, sign it out, bring it back. There's no reason why we couldn't do that. And to give sort of an example of what happens at the Open Squash Center, when kids from the Guild go there, there is, a really sort of healthy inventory of rackets and balls and sneakers and other stuff. And the kids, use it and then put it back when the lessons are over. And that has worked very well. And that would just transfer down here to the Elliott Center.
Yeah, but we got to make sure that this is public, and we want to be able to, we don't have anything to do with that other one. I don't have anything to do with Hudson Guild, and we want to play. One, I guess you say you want to put up a sign and say, come over here to get it and check it out. What I'm saying is there a possibility to have some type of kiosk where you get it and you put it back? Just a thought.
I think that thought's a great thought, by the way. We haven't thought about that. We have thought that we will staff it for some of the hours. It won't be staffed for all the hours that the park are open, but during those hours, we would have someone there with equipment who would be able to provide it. But a lockbox is a great idea, and we will look into it.
And sorry, the only other thing I would say is that, again, if Parks has a sort of a standard operating procedure around this, we probably have to line up with that.
Yeah.
My next question is, so you obviously met with Parks. Are they for this? Yeah. Are they going to build it?
So go ahead, James.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, we're going to build it. They would like your approval before we go ahead. That's really, so yes, well, I hesitate to say yes because we haven't got your approval, but if you say yes, they say yes. I think that's probably the right way to say it.
So they would give you the contract, Open Squash, to build this? Because if that's the case, that is a major breakthrough with Parks. I've never heard of anything like this. We've have other parks where we want to do things, and it's a 6-year process. We wanted to do a book kiosk one time in a park, and it wasn't even possible. So I'm really surprised and maybe glad to hear that they're going to subcontract this whole thing to you. I'm a little, Alan, isn't that a bit of a shock?
Yeah. So Brad, so the one thing I would say, so there is a little bit of a precedent for this, and it's definitely a little bit more involved. But there is a precedent on the Lower East Side at Hamilton Fish. A court was built sort of on the same idea, not on the after school athletics and academics program, but just a publicly accessible squash court was built in Hamilton Fish Park, and that was done with a private entity, and it didn't take 6 years. It was not an immediate turnaround, but it didn't take forever. So I think Parks, we have had a number of conversations with Parks. I don't want to overstate at all what they have said they've been very engaged in the conversation. Where we've gotten with them is they've said, we want to hear what the community board has to say about this, and then let's continue the conversation. So we've had a bunch of conceptual conversations, but there's still more work to be done. We do have a good example of this being done in a pretty short period of time on the Lower East Side.
That's great to hear, because we want to redo a basketball court, and if we can get a sponsor for someone to do it, let alone have them finish it in a real time, and then with the YouTube age and the internet, right? These kids will love to see themselves play basketball or handball. That's an interesting component to me. My third thing is tournaments. Are they going to have professional tournaments there? Are you going to have private tournaments there? How does that work?
I think if we have anything, it will be sort of in the style of an exhibition. We have relationships with with the #1 squash player in the world at the moment, Ali Farag, and he has certainly committed to doing exhibitions with us. And so we will bring squash superstars to do certain things, but they will always be with the idea of being open to all, encouraging usage of the sport. There's no ambition to do any private or commercial activity on the sport, on these courts. It's really about increasing access.
Well, James, all I'm saying is I like the idea of a tournament like a Rucker, where you guys are trying to build a mecca there, and we have something to do with that on the west side. So you're opening up a whole bunch of other doors. I would also like maybe to mark the court, the wall and the back wall, in a soccer style, because they play that indoor soccer. I don't have the exact name of it, where they use a smaller ball, and they can, and it's almost like a basketball court, and that also can be utilized in that way, just besides the tennis or the handball. I don't have the name of that sport, but they play it all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, if it can be played in the dimensions of the court, we're happy to do that.
Well, Marty, I'm stunned. I'm stunned that the Parks is allowing somebody else to come in there and do something. That's great news.
Yeah, I mean, but I want to make sure we level set expectations. It is, they've been super engaged, but we would have to have more conversation with them. I don't want to overstate. It is very exciting, and they have been very receptive. But I don't want to overstate that. They're going to sort of give us the keys tomorrow.
And Ken, on that one wall where you show artwork now, it'd be great to have some local artists change that out every 2 seasons or a season, because if James and Open Squash is going to be maintaining, which is amazing, it would be great to activate that also for non-sport activity.
I think that's a real possibility. I will say that what Parks was very clear about in looking at that and in talking about that was that it was clear that they didn't want it and that it would be inappropriate for it to be branded in any kind of a commercial way, even for Open Squash or Hudson Guild or anybody else's name, but as a usable, community wall for murals or art competition or whatever. I think that there would be some real opportunity there, but certainly not branding. And they were clear about that.
Yeah, no, they won't allow the branding, exactly. And then my last question, I'll move on.
We love the idea, just by the way, we would love the idea of this community art wall. We just think it would be fantastic. We don't need the branding. We think that's just a great use. So
Fred, your questioning about Parks probably means that we should have some direct conversation with Parks.
Yeah, I'm stunned, and I'm happy to hear it. My last question is, I know squash has doors. So how is that going to be maintained? What's the safety on closing a door? Who locks them? Or will there just be an open stance to get in without a door? If you could address that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's a door with a latch. It's in the middle of the back wall. It's a glass door. It doesn't lock. It never will lock. The park will close, and at which point you won't have access to it because the park will be closed, but the door to the squash court will never be locked.
As a kid who played racquetball, I smashed my hand in the door a few times at the YMCA. So I just want to make sure the closure's right on that.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
I mean, thank you. Will do.
Thank you, Brad. Gwen.
I'm thinking about those people who use the handball courts now that you're going to close. Do they know anything about this? Have they been, given some alternatives or something?
Well, so we don't have there don't have there is not, as we know, a sort of an organized group of handball players. There are some tournaments that happen there, but we were pretty clear about looking at what the alternatives are. This is a 6-court space, and that is a nice number, but there are many 6 and 8 and even more court spaces where tournaments could happen. For sort of regular use, the 3 courts on the east side of the wall would remain handball courts, and then the 3 courts with the squash courts on them would be still usable in addition to being squash courts. So I think that the big challenge would be around organizing a handball tournament, but there are many alternative spaces that have as many or more courts that an organized group could use.
Yeah, I'm not talking about organized groups. I'm talking about people who just, like to play.
And there will remain 3 full courts there for people to use anytime they want.
Do you have any information about how much these handball courts are used?
Sorry, Marty, how much they cost, did you say?
No, how much they're used.
Gwen is asking about the displacement of handball players from those courts by the squash courts. And I'm just amplifying her question by asking, do you have any information about how many folks are using, how many handball folks are now using those courts?
No, not that I can give you with any more than anecdotally.
Thank you. Leslie.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the presentation. I really particularly like this sport. I've never played squash, but I always think when it's a unique sport that wouldn't automatically have people in this area exposed to a sport like that, the value is much greater, right? Because you have your prerequisite city sports. I wouldn't say squash is one of them. So to have this exposure, I think there's a tremendous value in that alone. It's just opening up, like a whole new world, and you never know what kid is going to attach to it, right? Because now they have something that maybe others would have, and they might not have had that chance. I am going to echo Brad. I am shocked, and I'm glad Brad brought it up, that Parks is letting a private entity come in, build on their space, and then also, I guess, run the space. That's surprising. And Ken, I know we're always in touch with you, so I'm sure, we can know more about that. I only have one question though, and it's about when you said like these courts are unlocked or kept unlocked. Do you have any, and maybe this is more for Ken, I don't know, do you have any concern of loitering or because now you're talking about closed spaces and walls or crevices where people can kind of go in and hang out and, and if the cameras are not for security, but for more seeing if your swing is great, I don't know, what is your thought on that?
So, James, so maybe can you talk a little bit about, because we've had this conversation about the materials used in the walls. So
So one of the things, so the parks has said the same, and we may end up replacing some of the phenolic resin with glass as a result. Sort of think of it as putting windows in the side walls. so that you can see through it. We're going to work through that with the Parks Department. I think, at least we think they're the experts on that, on making sure that, the courts are not used for, I'll just say, inappropriate activities.
Or nefarious or bad actors or something just coming in and taking over a space that's meant for something else. Yeah. Okay. That would be a concern, a real concern.
It's a concern of ours too. We obviously don't want that to happen. It's not, I mean, it should be a concern of everyone's, really. So we're working through that with the parks now. They've asked that we put these windows in the side walls, which will probably happen. If that doesn't happen, we'll find another solution like it. But just the idea that you won't be able to hide inside the court, which is what I think you were alluding to. So we're gonna find a solution with the Parks Department to make sure that doesn't work.
And there's no security, right? It's just, I would get park security or regular, right?
Correct.
There's no special. Okay.
Yeah. So we will at certain hours, to be determined, have a person on site to encourage usage and to provide feedback and to provide just tips. And, again, I don't think we know how many hours we will end up doing that, but we'll do things like at 10 o'clock every Saturday morning, there'll be someone there to teach you how to play. They'll be there. They'll show you how to swing. They'll provide the equipment. They'll give you tips so that if you've never used the court, then there'll be signage up that'll say that sort of thing. So it's not the same as security, but there will be some people there during some hours that we will provide in order to encourage usage.
I guess my concern is more off hour, the off hours.
Yeah, off hours. Yeah. I hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Marinal.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you for that presentation, guys. I grew up in India, so I am somewhat familiar with the sport. It's not so popular in India, but very popular in Pakistan for sure. I mean, they produce a bunch of world champions. So thank you, great presentation. My question is, just from the one slide in the presentation, how involved is this design of the court? Like, how involved is the maintenance going to be? So say, for example, right now, Open Squash is, taking care of it, providing the personnel, providing the money. Let's say tomorrow, Open Squash decides to pull out and now the Parks Department is stuck with these courts. Like, do they have the wherewithal to the expertise to do the upkeep, the maintenance?
So first of all, it's a great question. The courts are designed to be minimally so that the maintenance requirements are as small as they possibly can be. Having said that, there's always something. It is a new design, so we don't know exactly what that will be. If it gives you any comfort, we are about to open another 8-court facility in New York, so it's not like we're going to go away next year, or we're growing. We're not shrinking. So we're going to be around for a long time. What happens in 20 years? I guess I can't imagine. But nothing about the court construction is unusual. So there's not a. For example, the glass back wall is a prefabbed thing that you can buy, and it's the same construction as a glass window in a store. And the steel construction is the same sort of construction that you would find in other public places. So the idea has been to keep it as simple as humanly possible, and in fact, actually to make the construction as inexpensive as possible. That's one of the innovations we've had. We've brought the cost of these courts way down. It's not a concern to you because we're paying for it either way, but it has meant that as the courts themselves have become less expensive, then obviously the maintenance of those courts is less expensive. So just to give you some numbers around that, normally one squash court would cost like, I don't know, $150,000 to $200,000 to install. We've brought this down to an installed cost per court of $70,000. And our goal is to take it down to $30,000. We haven't got there yet. By simplifying and using commonly used materials and making it just as open as humanly possible so that everyone can do it. We also publish the specs of the court so that they can be maintained by others. So theoretically, someone else could pick up the maintenance of it if they wanted to, and we would certainly, provide all of the schematics and everything. Again, our mission is to make the sport more open, and so anyone sort of just like the Hudson River Parks, who said, if you want to see anything, we'll publish it. We will also publish all the specs of all these things so that they can be maintained by others. Should for some terrible, horrible reason we no longer be around, which is certainly something I hope never happens. but we're human.
Well, I hope so too. Thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you. And back to Brad.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as Mirano, that is there a contract in place that you're signing with the Parks Department? A 5-year deal or a 10-year deal?
We received the first legal contract from them last week, and it's with our lawyers. And so I'm going to just reserve comment on that because it's a negotiation.
But there will then, in that agreement,
yeah,
there's an agreement to run it.
Correct. There's it is more subtle than that, to your point. So it's we have the right to provide people to maintain it and to provide programming on it. And then you've used the word to run it, so like a franchise. It's not entirely clear that the language will be exactly like that, and we're working through it.
Again, Marty, I'm stunned, right? What if we made a contract in another park to say, hey, we all want to get together and pay to get it cleaned? I mean, I'm shocked right now. That's fantastic. My other thing is, Marty, we've brought to this board many times, there's been some people that come and say, hey, we would like to have a paddle court, right? So is there an opportunity through this process to bring those people aboard? On the other courts, that's one idea. Then we've got a whole mecca of, a lot of different ages playing sports with the racket. But I think for sure, James, we're going to need, because we're a public, community board, what the actual foot traffic is on those courts currently. We could know. I couldn't recommend anything like this without any building we do, we get a traffic count, a foot count. There has to be some numbers saying, hey, there's 20 people using it on a Saturday. Or like, what is the count to say those 3 courts over there are plenty enough for what's going on? And 2, if there's not enough use at all, Martin, maybe those other courts could be a paddle tennis area. So I just want to make sure that we get that feedback, James.
Brad, you're starting,
yeah, understood.
You're starting to raise one of the concerns that I think our committee has, not just me, is writing a letter supporting this means that we are supporting one athletic activity over whatever others there may be. I don't even know what others there may be, and I don't know what the competition is for this space. And so we have to talk our way through, I think, the committee needs to talk our way through. Do we write a letter that says we recommend the park use the space for something that it's not now being used for? Do we write a letter to support the use of that space for this specific use, as opposed to, I don't know what the alternatives are, but what are the alternatives that we are neglecting? I think in order to write a letter, we need to begin to answer the questions, the questions that I'm raising, and I hope Leslie's going to give us the answer.
I just wanted to say, Marty, I was thinking the same things, and I wanted to say I would like to speak to Parks first. Don't you think we should talk to that, or no? Do you think that's not necessary in this?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Absolutely, I think it's necessary. I trust Ken absolutely.
Yeah, I know. See, I mean, exactly.
He has represented to us that they have talked to, and I don't know James, but I trust him absolutely too. What the hell? They've represented to us that they've spoken with Parks. That's hearsay information because we haven't got it directly.
I'm
So-
surprised they're not here now, Marty. I'm a
Yeah.
bit surprised.
So just again, just to clarify a couple of things. One, just I'm going to go back to your prior question first, Brad. A couple of things that I think are worth considering are that we are, and I'm not being facetious about this, right? But this is a pilot, right? It's so the goal here is to do this certainly with every expectation that it's going to work and be successful, and certainly going to be successful as an extension of free after school and summer camp programming for local kids, in addition to its other uses, right? But the goal here is to set it up as a pilot to try and expand opportunities for local kids, but a pilot. So I think that's one important consideration. I will say, as regards other activities, because this is sort of a pilot or an experiment, I do think it's notable that there is a group that's here and is ready to sort of do the investing to make it happen. And others may do that, but this is one that is right here in and ready to go. And then third, as for parks, they were specific with us that we've talked, that they wanted to hear what you had to say. Just to be clear, they're not out in front of you, but they are interested to hear your take on this.
Well,
Ken, but here's the issue, right?
We're beginning to express some of the concerns that we have, and you're hearing alternative uses. Is one of them.
Absolutely.
We love the word pilot. We love the word pilot in Community Board 4. We love to hear this. And I'm not saying, I don't hear anybody on this board saying we don't love the idea. But for us to go back to the public, we need to know who's maintaining it. What is the current Hudson Guild program going on 38th Street? Is it 100 kids? Is it 50 kids? And currently we have this amount of handball people playing. Those kind of stats kind of given back to us will allow us to say, yeah, we support this. Let's really try this pilot program. That's all I think we're saying, Ken.
Sure. And we can do that. I know that we've got some bigger picture sort of data on citywide, how much handball playing is happening and the increases in squash, and that stuff I think is pretty readily available. James, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that information does exist. And then we have to figure out if there is regular foot traffic, on these local courts that is quantifiable.
Berta.
So I firstly wanted to address the question that you brought up, Marty, specifically about the use of the court and favoring one athletic activity over another. I believe both Ken and James brought up the fact that some of the off-label uses of the handball courts, or even recreational, non-competitive, non-tournament uses of the handball courts, may still be available with the configured
100%.
squash courts. And so I think that should be something that we consider as a committee, is different than maybe changing it to, a pickleball court or a tennis court. It's a different configuration, and it's one that's pretty compatible with the current use. So I think that that's one point in its favor. I guess the other question that we should ask as a committee, and I don't know if the speakers have the information, is where the nearest other handball courts are, so that we know that there are ones in the reasonable vicinity if that's a concern. There are a number in Hell's Kitchen in the West 40s, and then in Dewitt Clinton Park. I'm not sure if there are others in Chelsea that I can think of off the top of my head.
We have that information.
Okay.
So Marty,
Yeah, there
are you guys asking us for a letter, Marty? Like, what are you thinking?
That's the way I
Mr. Chair?
understand it. I understand Ken in his opening remarks said that he's looking for support from our committee for this activity. I think it's clear that Ken and James have done a lot of thinking about this, but it's our first exposure to it. When I was told that this was on the agenda, I said, "All right, let's see what we're told, and let's see what there's been with me. There's been no back room conversation about this, so this is this is my first information, and I'm speaking not as the chair, but just as a member of the committee. Without more information and without information from Parks, I've been taking notes like crazy because I think the committee may ask me to write a letter that I'm uncomfortable doing without the information that's missing, without having heard from Parks, without, I'm not even sure. I want to hear.
So Martin, is one way to say to Open Squash and to James that is it a consensus on the board that we are very intrigued and very excited about this process? We just need some numbers back on the use and some of the other things that could be done with the courts. Just as they're sitting behind the scenes waiting for our response, we're dying to hear theirs. So I don't know if it's a verbal thing, James, that you share,
Brad,
but it's not just that, Brad. It's not just that. I'm 100% behind this. I think it's wonderful. Anything new and interesting and, something is great for our neighborhood. I think it's a magnet, it's like a destination point. I just have a question more about the public-private thing for Parks. That's like, everyone has different questions. Some might be use, some might be handball, or that. I would have some just conversations with Parks, maybe a few questions about the private public nature of it, and what they're expecting from a privately owned, area of a public park. Anyway, so I would echo Marty a little bit, but not at all Ken and James about the nature of if we support it or not. I don't think that's I don't. I'll speak for myself. I
agree with you, Leslie.
I need to hear a little bit more from you, Leslie. I hear two issues. I hear the public-private one that you're just raising, and the alternative use.
I guess what I'm saying is I want to send. Me as a member, I would want to send a letter in 100% support of this. But in order to do that, I just have questions for Parks about, what my questions are. Brad might have his questions. Roberta might have her questions. I don't. It might be, I just have questions about, like I said, for me, it's the private public aspect of it.
And just to be clear, you're not concerned. The concern that I've been expressing is the alternative uses for this space. You're not concerned about that. You're saying.
Personally, no, I love this. I love this idea. I think this is wonderful. I think this is great. It should be a green light. It's more the other aspects of it. But you might have other concerns. I don't want to speak.
No, I'm trying to get, I'm working hard to get the temperature, the reading of the committee, and we're expressing possibly objections to this project, public-private being one. It might not even be an objection. I don't know.
It's not an
Marty,
objection.
I don't think it's an objection.
No.
What we're saying is, I don't think we could write a word, we're shocked, but we could say, we are very happy to see a pilot program where you're allowing private money to build something on a public park. That's amazing. That's just like, that could, let us say if our council member said, I now got $1 million and we've got Open Basketball is a nonprofit that wants to redo a whole court. We don't have to wait for all those other things that we've waited years for. I want an open library in a park with a reading section and a chess tournament. There's so many possibilities that this opens up.
I think Brad is also saying there's a precedent. It's also a precedent.
It's a great precedent. It's
well, and so to be clear, they do exist, right? So, oh gosh, the name just slipped my head. The budgeting process, the public budgeting process that everybody has been involved in.
Our budget task force, the budget, the district needs.
The voting, though, the public voting where people propose projects and there's voting.
Oh, participatory budgeting.
Participatory budgeting, thank you. Right, through participatory budgeting, Penn South Playground, right, was getting, which is a public park, right? It's called Penn South, but as you all know better than me, is a public park, right? It's a parks space, right? That's getting upgrades through funding designated through participatory budgeting. I think the Hamilton Fish Squash Court is a good example of another one, and certainly, the franchises and concessions whole thing for money-making ventures. So I think that there's actually quite significant precedent.
But Ken, that's two things, Ken. That's still public money. That's still public money. This is different. This is a non-for-profit coming in to a public park saying we want to build and possibly operate or activate's a better word, right, James? Activate the space and maintain it with people and clean the garbage up. I mean, that's like a dream. So I think that's what I'm excited about, let alone the squash. Martin, if we got to write a letter, I don't know what the chair's thinking.
The chair's trying to figure out what the committee wants. If the committee wants a letter, I need to hear more voices saying what Leslie has been saying, that conceptually, I'll use your language, Brad, we're happy to see a pilot program using private money in a public park. What's the language of the letter?
If without being presumptuous, I think from my conversations with parks, I think that letter, if a letter said, we see this as a potentially valuable initiative in Chelsea Park. We do have questions, and sort of list out a couple of those questions, like public-private, what the public-private partnership looks like, usage, current usage, as well as alternative usage. I think that would invite more useful conversation and selfishly would move the conversation forward without committing you all, and frankly without committing them, but showing support for going forward, assuming some critical questions could be answered. I'm not a committee member.
I think Ken brings up some good points, and just one last thing from me on this, Brad. I know we're excited about this, or you might think this is the public-private is great, and I agree. This presentation was great. We will get pushback from some on board saying, "Wait, now everything is for sale." Now our public space, private people can just come in here and and put their own thing up. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just anticipating certain arguments that might be. Absolutely. I don't know that might, or maybe I'm overthinking it.
No, you're absolutely
right.
No,
but Leslie, I think you're right.
Wait, hold on, Brad. Hold on. There are other people that want to speak, and I'll come back to you, sir. Let me go to Candace, who hasn't spoken, and then to Roberta.
So my thinking, thank you guys. My thinking was just with private and public, the funding on it, the way it's going to be built now. So if it's public, it's a prevailing wage. I'm just thinking as that's I work with workers, but that was if we're gonna I feel like now if we go to a private, are they gonna not have to pay the prevailing wage as the public? I mean, if it's a public thing, it's taxpayer money. Is that making sense or no?
As I heard the conversation, and let me try and articulate it, James and Ken, we are getting private money to build squash courts from a not-for-profit organization that James represents, to build squash courts in Chelsea Park. Maintenance of that court, that court will be in a Parks Department property under Parks Department rules, probably under Parks Department wages, but that's your question. I said probably, I didn't say definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
I know that the contractors we use need to be approved by the Parks Department. I don't know more than that, and we're not in the. You can imagine we're not in the business of paying people below what they're supposed to be paid. So all I know from the Parks Department is that there's a process that we have to go through in order to get the contractors approved. We will be using local contractors to do it. They're not selected yet, so I can't really talk to it a lot. We have talked to some people about we have talked to some contractors about it, but
that's going to have to go through a parks approval process.
100%. Yeah. They bless that contractor. Yeah.
And that is Candace's question, I think.
Yeah, because if it's now taken over by a private company, then they can pay their workers whatever they want. But if it stays under the Parks Department, then that's prevailing wage, that's city money.
I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing that they're looking for a private contractor to build this, but it's a private contractor that's approved by Parks and therefore meets whatever Parks criteria are for private contractors.
But aren't these questions for Parks, Marty?
Yes, they are.
Right. Okay.
And we haven't spoken to Parks yet.
So can we think about that as adding a question, I guess?
Making a note.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go. My note is that one of our concerns is that we haven't spoken with Parks about this issue. We don't know what their position is about the whole project, and includes the issue that you're raising, Candace, I think.
Thank you.
Roberta.
Sorry to bring this up again. I think we got sidetracked. I asked earlier the nearby courts, and Ken was about to answer, and then we had a different.
Yeah. And we can give you this in follow up, but just very quick answer. Asher Levy, over on 23rd and the FDR, closer to us. Tony Depolito, right on Clarkson and 7th Avenue, has. It doesn't say the number of courts, but then Gertrude Kelly Playground on 17th Street and 8th has 3 courts. May Meathers on 46th and 9th. Hell's Kitchen Park on 47th and 10th. Gutenberg on 49th between 9th and 10th. On the east side, Vincent Albano, 2nd Avenue and 29th Street. St. Barton's on 2nd Avenue and 35th, and DeWitt Clinton, on 53rd and 12th are some places we can.
I'll add the James Walker Park on Hudson and Leroy as well. Just throw that in there.
We can give you that in an easier.
There's a lot there. If you guys want to take a look, if you just Google handball courts, under the New York City govparks.org/facilities/handball, it lists all of the handball courts. There are in all of the boroughs 2,500 of them, and they're pretty evenly split. So there's going to be more than 500 in Manhattan. Of course, there isn't one within 5 blocks of this, but there are ones within.
Well, 17th and 8th is pretty.
Yeah.
So let me step in and take a leadership role and try something out on the committee. My sense is there's some silence going on from the committee, so I'm trying to speak for everybody. If you object, I need to hear. we're writing a letter. And the letter is going to say that this is a potentially valuable conceptual initiative in Chelsea that we want more information about. We have some concerns about public-private alternative usage, nearby handball courts, parks and union wages, and we haven't yet spoken to parks, so we don't know what we're stepping into. As I got it, that's what the letter says.
May I make a suggestion?
I'll take it.
I would not send a letter because I think if we're going to send a letter, I mean, we all like this, right? Unless, you know, I think it's a great idea. I would want to send a letter that's 100% in favor of it, not some, we don't know, because it sounds like, why are we writing a letter? We're just writing a letter telling people we don't know what we want. I would want to write a letter saying, we love this idea. This is a great idea. But in order to do that, Marty, I would suggest, can't we just invite parks specifically about this to our next meeting? Once we get our answers, then after that, let's write a letter. You know, once we have all our questions answered, we write a letter in, well, I don't want to say in support prematurely, but in support. I think if we write a letter saying, we love the idea, but this, it's gonna,
Too wishy-washy.
yeah, I don't want Ken and James to be, you know, we want to give them a green light. We don't want to give them, you know, like, we have all these million concerns.
I've got an amber light here, not a green light. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Everybody in agreement with what Leslie just said. I think everybody is in agreement with what Leslie just said. We are going to invite parks to an upcoming meeting, whether it's next month or not, I can't promise. Janine will
Marty,
know.
I think Jennifer had her hand up.
No, I think she didn't. Well, if she had her
okay,
hand
sorry.
up, Jennifer, if you have your hand up, then you need to speak, but I thought you left it up from the last time, am I right?
So I did have my hand up, but
Oh,
you
Jennifer,
asked.
I'm sorry, I was looking at Candace. Jennifer, you go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were just asking for everybody's opinions, and so I was going to say that I was fully in support, and also just kind of going with what Leslie said, that I'm still learning all the writing a letter and what that means and all that, but just that if we did that, we'd want it to be fully supportive, so that instead of having, you know, like she was saying, having questions or having hesitations, I think that when we do write it, we want it to be 100% that we want this.
We write a lot of letters that are 100% with concerns. So, but I think, and I have a lot of, the problem Leslie's raising correctly is that I have more concerns than the 100%. And she would want a letter that is more in favor, even though there may be one or two concerns. I hope I'm expressing this correctly. And that the first thing we need to do is have Parks speak with us. And that, I hope, can be arranged. Janine will help us arrange that, I hope. Am I?
I think the other thing that I can perhaps do, I don't mean to interrupt, but we will volunteer to do a, someone had the right phrase for it, I'm not going to get the phrase right, but like a foot traffic on the courts analysis. We will, we'll commit to figuring out something like that, so that you can see. We kind of know what it is. I've been being very quiet about it because I just don't believe in saying anything if you don't have the data to support it. You know, and so I don't. So we have a gut feeling for what that is, but it's just that it's a gut feeling. It's not actually scientific. So we'll go in and look at it for a week and then just give you the analysis of what the footfall looks like over a period of time, so that you have.
That would be very helpful. And my gut is that Parks does not have that information.
No, I don't think anyone has that information. I think it has to be done de novo. And so we'll go out and figure out a way to get that done.
So we're leaving it with that we want to hear from Parks, that we have the concerns that I articulated before, and those will be the questions that we ask of Parks. Thank you. I got one thumbs up.
I'd put a thumbs up, but I don't think that's appropriate. So
That's a non-voting thumbs
No,
up. James.
you're right, James. That would be
That's not the thumb on the scale, I think.
I'm trying to get committee people to respond, but you're welcome to join the committee.
Poor Ken, he didn't think he was going to be here at 9 at night talking about the squash court.
All good, delighted. Honestly, it is, and I really do appreciate this conversation. I will tell you that, and I know you've all expressed this. The real meaning and success of this program has been tremendous, and I know you've all said really nicely that part of it resonates for you. I can tell you, I was over at the Open Squash Center. And James mentioned Ali Farag, who's the #1 player in the world. He is from Egypt, and the number, I think, 4 player Miguel Rodriguez was there with the kids from Hudson
from
Guild
Colombia.
On the court.
Yeah.
And just the kids had all Googled them before we went over. And the playing was sort of fierce, and the kids were really excited about it. Right, it's a nice way of connecting, and I know you all know that. So if we can make our way to the important pieces of how to use this public space appropriately, the outcome could be really great for kids in the neighborhood.
You've just articulated the concern of everybody in the committee. It sounds like a great project, but we want to be sure that we use the public space appropriately.
Totally fair. Makes good sense.
Okay. The next conversation about this issue will be with Parks at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you all. We'll be there as guests in the background or participants, as whatever makes most sense for you all.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, James. Appreciate the information.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Great to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
We have one more piece of business, ladies and gentlemen, and on the agenda it says old business, new business. Otherwise, we should adjourn.
I've got some new business, Marty.
You would have.
I'd like to know how you activate a pilot program with the parks. I would love to hear on how you initiate that. That's great. Thank you, guys.
I mean, I think that's the conversation we're going to have with Parks. Exactly. If they're saying they want to hear from us, as opposed to just saying to Hudson Guild, go for it. It feels to me like Parks is kicking the can to the community board. Just saying. I know I'm being recorded. So Janine, should I have a conversation with you tomorrow about how we get Parks on the agenda for this issue?
Yes, we can discuss about that. I can try to get Steve and Paul in a meeting maybe, or to see if they can provide any answers or agree to join the either the meeting in December or January.
I think a backroom meeting is not as good an idea because everybody who's on this call wants to hear the information coming right from them. If they want a backroom meeting, of course I'll attend, but
okay.
December would be a good time to have a meeting. And that's where we're going to leave it, friends. And nobody's offered old business, new business, except for Brad, who's asking a good question.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Marty, my one new business really is that company on the East
Wait a
River
minute, you
side.
serious now, Brad? Come on, let me hear it.
Well, I was told every month that we're going to have this company that does the turbines in the East River come over and talk to us about all the pilot programs they could do in the Hudson. And I've been asking since July, and I was told it was going to come up. I was hoping maybe we get them on the December docket then, Marty.
Janine has a better sense of upcoming program than I do.
Yeah, so we were planning to put them on the December meeting, just because I think Jeffrey wanted to be part of the conversation and he knew he wasn't going to be able to join tonight. So they're lined up for December.
That's a great answer. Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for a lively meeting. I appreciate your input.
Good night.
Bye,
night,
guys.
everyone.
Good night, everybody. Be well. Be